Fade in. Well, everyone, the moment Star Wars fans all over the globe have been waiting for has been officially announced. It doesn't seem fake this time. It seems that Kathleen Kennedy is officially stepping down as president of Lucasfilm. Now, what does that mean for the franchise, and what does her legacy look like? Oh, I'm sure she'll get lots of media spin about her tenure as the head of one of the greatest sci-fi franchises of all time, but we all know the truth. 'Cause I've been living life right like I could just die any minute. Go for a ride down the... Hi everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment in the comment section below, but also subscribe. I'm trying to reach 2,500 subscribers by the end of 2026. So every time you tell one of your friends about me and they hit that subscribe button, it gets me closer to my goal. So thank you to everyone who does that. Okay, so it seems that, yes, it is true this time. Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down from Star Wars. We had been hearing rumors that Disney was trying to get rid of her as far back as the release of The Rise of Skywalker, which should have been called The Rise of Palpatine, but nothing ever stuck. And it is clear that Kathleen Kennedy was the wrong person to take over Lucasfilm. And on paper, she seemed like the correct person. She had known George Lucas for a long time. She had worked with Steven Spielberg and her husband, Frank Marshall, on several movies that the two of them produced. And of course, Spielberg and George Lucas directed. But the fact is, she was more of a ride-along. And in Steven Spielberg's own words, her job was to take notes and to fetch coffee. She wasn't really there to provide any sort of creative input unless it was just something off the cuff that she said. But he even said she was really bad at taking notes. And if you'll remember, in a celebration of the Indiana Jones franchise, he thanked pretty much everyone but her in his presentation about the film franchise. So yeah, she is not exactly what should have been put in place of Star Wars. And Disney had this problem because Bob Iger, who had taken over from Michael Eisner, and Michael Eisner was the Disney CEO when I was there, and he did usher in a new age of Disney. He gave us, the Disney Toon Channel, where we got to see such amazing Saturday morning cartoons like Darkwing Duck. He brought in The Lion King. The problem was he just stayed for too long. And so even though he did do some incredibly good decisions, he just ran out of ideas and he started making some sort of bumbling decisions. Bob Iger comes in, and Bob Iger is like, hey, we've got the female audience cornered with our Disney princess films. We need to bring in more men. But instead of focusing on what they already had, like Treasure Planet or Tarzan or The Sword in the Stone or something like that, The Black Cauldron, they decided to bring in Marvel and Star Wars. The problem is they didn't want the men and the boys that came with those two franchises. So when George Lucas announced that he was retiring, they brought on Kathleen Kennedy because it was the era of Me Too and Believe All Women and, nevertheless she persisted and all those fancy buzzwords that ultimately amounted to nothing. And we got the Star Wars sequel series, which was a complete disaster. Now, some people point out, hey, but they each made over $1 billion. Yeah, with diminishing returns. If you look at them, each film in the franchise went lower, and then of course they doubled down on Disney Plus. Now, it was not all bad. I don't want to paint this picture that every single thing that they put out under Kennedy's regime was bad. The first two seasons of The Mandalorian were certainly good. Andor, Rogue One, Star Wars Visions, even though I don't like season 2 as much as 1 and 3, it was still a good franchise. The last season of The Clone Wars. But then we got mediocre projects like Ahsoka and The Bad Batch, or we got outright trash like The Acolyte, and I had the unpleasant experience of watching The Acolyte. One of the projects that kind of gets lost in the loop, and it's kind of shown that this was the direction Star Wars was going to go, was Solo. I actually thought Solo was not a bad film. You can read my review of it. You can definitely tell when it changes hands in the director because it went through three different directors before they settled on Ron Howard. And Ron Howard is a really good director, and he did a really good job of making Solo work. But because of all the bad publicity and the fact that Han Solo, we had witnessed his very horrible death in The Force Awakens, it lost money, like a lot of these other projects. Now, Kathleen Kennedy didn't just strip mine Star Wars, she also dug in on Indiana Jones, bringing in her British friend Phoebe Waller-Bridge to help rewrite it and also star in it. And so instead of getting a really good father-son story, which was the original pitch, they made it where his son was in fact dead, and he gets this new sort of apprentice who's also somehow better than him in every which way, and he's just the sad, meandering, deadbeat husband. And it's very disappointing to see your heroes in that way. They did the same thing to Han Solo. They did the same thing to Luke Skywalker. I'm surprised they didn't do it to Lando, but, I guess they couldn't do it to everyone. But then they bring this in to Willow. Now, I didn't watch Willow. The trailers for Willow looked awful. And that was the last franchise that she had to strip mine, and it was so bad that not only did they cancel it, because it was supposed to run for something like 5 seasons, they canceled it after 1, and they actually used it as a tax write-off. So I think that is Kathleen Kennedy's legacy. It's a legacy of failure. She will forever be known as the Hollywood producer who killed 3 franchises. The fact of the matter is, she was just a terrible producer who tried to insert third wave feminism or woke feminism, whatever you want to call it, into the story arcs, and it did not work. It destroyed the franchise. So there is no love lost between me and I'm sure other Star Wars fans and Kathleen Kennedy. She completely ruined that franchise, took away what made it special, and tried to insert modern politics into it. And it just came off as not progressive, but regressive. So now, who is taking over Star Wars? All of us who loved The Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 before Kennedy got her claws into it in Season 3, we all wanted none other than Jon Favreau to take over. However, he seems to just be happy with playing in the Mandalorian sandbox that he has. He doesn't seem interested in taking over. And also, he's kind of angry because he was supposed to oversee most of the TV projects, especially the ones that were around the same time as The Mandalorian, such as the Book of Boba Fett. But then Kathleen Kennedy got Dave Filoni and Robert Rodriguez, who did the Book of Boba Fett, on her side, and that kind of streamlined it. And Dave Filoni became nothing more than a yes man for Kathleen Kennedy, but he is the one who has been chosen to take the keys to the kingdom. According to Google's Gemini AI overview, Kathleen Kennedy has stepped down as Lucasfilm president, with Dave Filoni taking over creative leadership as president and chief creative officer, and Lin-Wen Brennan becoming co-president, handling business operations, splitting her former duties to guide Star Wars into its next era. This leadership change splits responsibilities between Filoni for creative vision, building on his Clone Wars, Mandalorian, and Ahsoka work, and Brennan for the business, aiming for a new chapter for the franchise. Brennan, I have issues with because she is just Kathleen Kennedy 2.0. If it's true she's just going to be handling the day-to-day, just going to be kind of be a glorified number puncher, I don't know why they didn't just make her vice president, but in this era we have to have co-presidents, which is dumb. She should just have been made the vice president, and she's in charge of the clerical duties and overseeing that. Now, that's a big feat, don't get me wrong, but if she has any sort of say in the creative process, Star Wars isn't going to be better. Now, Dave Filoni is kind of split here because he actually was hand-trained by George Lucas. In fact, he was one of the key players in Lucas Animation, which is how we got the Clone Wars. And by the way, I still like the Clone Wars. I like Star Wars Rebels. Ahsoka as a character kind of grew on me. I don't think she should have been Anakin Skywalker's apprentice. I think that they should have just had her be the apprentice of a Jedi who worked closely with Obi-Wan and Anakin just sometimes got stuck with her. That is something I can get over because Rebels especially kind of separated the two. Same with the Clone Wars. Towards the end of the series, Ahsoka and Anakin kind of started going their separate ways. She started hanging out with Plo Koon and Yoda a lot. That's why she grew on me. And so nothing against Filoni creatively. He's very creative. But the question is, has he changed? Because he became a sort of yes man for Kathleen Kennedy. But now the only person he has to say yes to is Bob Iger. He doesn't have that in between. So will he return to that creative spirit that he once had when he was actually under George Lucas, or will he remain the same? That is a good question, because he stood by and did nothing when Kathleen Kennedy put Gina Carano through the persecution that she did. Oh, y'all thought this video wouldn't mention Gina Carano? Boy, were you wrong. Gina Carano was a compelling actress, and she played a compelling character in Cara Dune. And her show, she was supposed to get her own TV show called Rangers of the New Republic, and that's where a lot of the stuff regarding Admiral Thrawn was supposed to play out. But because that didn't happen, it had to be shoved into Ahsoka and The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, so it didn't have its own series to fester in, and that's why The Mandalorian season 3 was so bloated. And also, just the way the hypocrisy works here. Kathleen Kennedy, she's like, oh, the Force is female, and we're not going to do Luke's story anymore. We're going to do Rey Palpatine's story. And then she fires Gina Carano, who is actually playing a compelling female character that male audiences were also grafting onto, not just the female ones. And then Kathleen Kennedy fired her over some social media posts not meant to hurt anyone. Meanwhile, Pedro Pascal gets to post Confederate flags on his social media, and he doesn't get any sort of trouble. He doesn't even get his pay docked. So don't talk to me about that. Yes, Gina Carano is another aspect of that. And Filoni stood by and did nothing. At least some of her former castmates came out and defended her, but Filoni stood by and did nothing. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Will they bring back Gina Carano? Doubtful. She has announced, as I mentioned in a previous video, on her settlement with Walt Disney Pictures, because she sued them with the help of Elon Musk and got a favorable settlement, or at least a favorable dissolution of the court case. And she's going to star in her own TV show where she's going to play a private eye. And I fully intend on watching that. But back to Filoni. My opinion on him is very divided. We're going to have to wait and see on this one. I'm not sure how he's going to play out. We'll have to wait to see, especially how the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, which comes out this year in our Lord 2026. I hope it's good. I want it to be good because I really did like the first 2 seasons, and I'm looking forward to seeing, because supposedly Mandalorian and Grogu was made away from Kennedy. That was part of his deal. We'll see. Favreau, it's rumored that James Gunn is trying to bring Favreau onto the DC universe. And certainly with casting of Marvel actors in these movies, that could be a distinct possibility. Whatever the case may be, I do look forward to seeing what Filoni is going to do, for nothing else, as it'll give me some good content here on my vidcast. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment, tell what you think, and subscribe. Like I said, I'm trying to get to 2,500 subscribers by the end of the year. If you want to support me in the work that I do, check out my website. The link is in the description of the video. It's studiojakemedia.substack.com, where I have even more Star Wars content. I also talk about comic books, anime, film, television, whatever you would like is there. That's the best way you can support me, is subscribing to that. I've got different tiers that unlock different perks, including getting to pick out the topic for this vidcast and the website. It's a pretty good deal, so check it out. At that same website, there's a conveniently titled Buy My Book section. It's where you can pick up 1 or all 4 of my novels. I've got links all over the place, but you can get them all on Amazon.com. Be sure to check them out. Leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake, and may the Force be with you.